The stroke had been minor, that's what they called it, a minor stroke. As if the word minor could soften the way the world shifted 3 degrees off its axis and never quite returned to where it had been. That was 8 months ago. Since then, my daughter and her husband had begun speaking to me the way people speak to someone they've already decided isn't really there anymore. I noticed it first in the pauses, the half-second delay before answering a question I'd asked, as if they were deciding whether it was worth the effort. Then the way my son-in-law would move papers off the kitchen table when I walked in, not quickly enough to be obvious, just enough to be deliberate. The way my daughter would smile at me, warm, patient, slightly rehearsed, like someone performing kindness for an audience. I had been an architect for 31 years. I designed hospitals, courthouses, 3 university libraries. I read blueprints the way other people read novels. And now, apparently, I could no longer be trusted to read a bank statement. What they didn't know, what I had decided, quietly and without fanfare, to keep to myself, was that I understood every word they said, every phone call just beyond the doorway, every hushed conversation at the kitchen island that stopped when my slippers shuffled across the hardwood. I understood all of it. I simply stopped letting on that I did. It had started by accident, the way most useful things do. 6 weeks after I came home from the hospital, my son-in-law was on the phone in the back hallway, pacing the way he always did when he thought no one was watching. I had come downstairs for a glass of water, moving slowly the way I did in those early weeks, and I stopped at the bottom of the stairs when I heard my name. Not because I was snooping, because you always stop when you hear your own name spoken in a voice that low. "She signs whatever we put in front of her," he said. A pause. "No, Claire doesn't need to know the specifics. She thinks it's just consolidating accounts. Easier management. That's all." Another pause. He laughed at something. "She asked me twice this morning what day it was. We've got time." I stood very still at the bottom of those stairs, my hand on the newel post, and I thought about what I'd just heard. Then I walked to the kitchen, poured my glass of water, and went back to bed. The next morning, I asked my daughter what day it was. She told me gently, touching my hand. I nodded and looked out the window. She believed me completely. That was the moment I understood what I had and what it could do for me if I used it carefully enough. My house sits on a corner lot in Savannah, Georgia, 3 blocks from the river. My late husband Thomas and I bought it in 1989, the year our daughter was born. We stripped it down to the bones and put it back together ourselves on weekends, Thomas with a nail gun and me with graph paper and a stubbornness neither of us ever quite outgrew. The house has 14-foot ceilings, heart pine floors, and a wraparound porch that catches the evening breeze off the water. It is worth considerably more now than it was then. My son-in-law knew this better than anyone. He had come into our lives 8 years ago, charming in the way that only reveals itself as calculation much later. He wore good shoes. He knew wine. He spoke about my daughter with a fluency that sounded like devotion, and, in the beginning, I believed it was. My daughter had always chosen people who needed rescuing, and he had chosen her with the careful instinct of someone who recognized a soft landing when he saw one. It took me years to see it clearly. The stroke, ironically, gave me the stillness to look. Rosa had worked for me for 11 years. She came 3 mornings a week, then every day after Thomas died, and then full-time after the stroke, when my daughter insisted I needed someone present. Rosa was a small woman from Jalisco with a dry sense of humor and an unfailing ability to know when I was faking. She figured it out within a week. It was a Tuesday. She had brought my tea to the sitting room and set it on the side table, and I was staring at the window the way I'd been doing, performing a kind of soft vacancy that I'd found quite effective, when she sat down across from me and folded her hands in her lap. "You don't fool me," she said. I looked at her. "You haven't fooled me since Thursday," she added. "You read the newspaper wrong side up for 20 minutes, then you flipped it over when you thought I wasn't looking." I held her gaze for a moment. Then I put down my cup. "You can't tell anyone," I said. She tilted her head. "Tell anyone what?" That was all she said. She got up, collected the biscuits she'd brought, left one on my saucer, and went back to the kitchen. Rosa knew what loyalty was. She'd had enough people in her life who didn't. In the weeks that followed, I became a student of my own house. I moved through it slowly, keeping to the rhythms they expected: morning tea, a nap before lunch, sometimes an afternoon in the sitting room with the television on low. But I listened. I listened with the focused attention of someone who has spent 3 decades reading the invisible lines in a building to understand where the weight really falls. My son-in-law came by 4 or 5 times a week, always with a reason. A document that needed a signature, a financial matter he was helping to simplify. He sat across from me at the dining table with his legal pad and his careful explanations, pausing often, using small words, repeating himself with an expression of patient concern that I had come to recognize as theater. I signed what he put in front of me in those early weeks before I understood what I was doing. He knew that. He was counting on the fact that I didn't remember signing anything, but I remembered. I remembered every page. My daughter came less frequently than her husband, which told me something. She worked long hours at the landscape architecture firm downtown, and I believed she was genuinely busy, genuinely tired, and I had to admit this to myself in the quiet of those long afternoons, genuinely unwilling to look too closely at what her husband was doing in her name. There is a particular kind of blindness that is chosen rather than inherited, and my daughter had always been gifted at it when the alternative was something she didn't want to see. Still, she was my daughter. I had rocked her through ear infections and read to her every night until she was 11, and stood in the kitchen when she called from college the first time. She had her heart broken, whispering, "Yes, I know, into the phone. There was no version of what I was doing that didn't include a door left open for her. I just needed to know first how far in she was. I got my answer on a Wednesday evening in late October. Rosa had gone home for the night. I was in the upstairs study with the door pulled nearly closed, sitting in the wingback chair Thomas had loved when my daughter and her husband came in downstairs. I heard them in the kitchen, the refrigerator opening, the familiar rhythm of 2 people who have stopped pretending to be happy in any room where someone might notice. "The attorney's office called," my son-in-law said. "We're confirmed for the 14th. "She might not understand what she's signing," my daughter said. "That's fine." A long silence. The refrigerator door again. "What exactly is she signing, Marcus?" "I told you. It's the property transfer. The house, the investment accounts, the river cottage. Everything into the family trust. That's everything she has, which will be ours eventually anyway." His voice was steady, reasonable, the voice of someone explaining something obvious to someone being unnecessarily sentimental. "This just removes the estate probate, the taxes, the delay. We're protecting the family." My daughter said nothing for a while. "She won't know?" she asked finally. "She'll know she signed something. She won't track the details." "You've seen her, Claire." Last week she called me Thomas. I had not called him Thomas. I had said the name to test what he'd do with it. What I heard next was what I had most needed to know. My daughter did not correct him. She did not say that I had been sharper lately, that something felt off, that maybe they should slow down. She set her glass down on the counter and said, quietly, "Make sure Rosa isn't there that morning." I sat in the wingback chair for a very long time after they left. The next morning, I asked Rosa to call my attorney's office and request a private meeting, not at the house, not at any address my son-in-law knew. Rosa's cousin drove us to a coffee shop on the south side, and from there, I called Warren Hadley myself, using Rosa's phone. Warren had handled our family's legal affairs for 20 years. He was a practical man, the kind who speaks in complete sentences and doesn't waste time on expressions of surprise. When I told him what I'd heard, he was quiet for a moment. "Are you certain about the figures?" he asked. I told him about the documents I'd signed, the account numbers I'd memorized, the transfers I'd tracked in the small notebook I kept inside my copy of Willa Cather on the bookshelf in the study, the one nobody touched. "How long have you been doing this?" he asked. "Since October," I said. 6 weeks. Another pause. Eleanor, are you all right? I'm better than anyone thinks, I said. That's rather the point. Warren met me twice over the next 10 days. We did not meet at his office. Rosa drove me to the library the first time, and a garden center the second, and I sat in the back of his car in the parking lot while he walked me through what he'd found. The transfers were real. Marcus had moved $340,000 through a management company he controlled. One my daughter either knew nothing about or had decided not to ask questions about. He had drafted documents that would, if I signed them on the 14th, transfer the Savannah house and the River Cottage into a family trust with him as the sole managing trustee. My daughter would be a beneficiary in name. He would control every decision. Warren had also found something else. A second phone Marcus used, not hard to trace once you know to look. There was a woman in Atlanta. There had been, it seemed, for about 2 years. I did not cry when Warren told me this. I thought about my daughter, who had smiled at me with such careful patience for 8 months, who had chosen not to know what her husband was doing, and I felt something close to grief but quieter, more like resignation, like recognizing a load-bearing wall that was never going to move no matter how you drew the plans around it. What do you want to do? Warren asked. I want to let them come on the 14th, I said. He looked at me over his glasses. Eleanor, I want to see the whole thing, I said. I want to sit across that table and watch him put the papers in front of me. I need to see how far he goes. Warren was quiet for a moment. And your daughter? I need to see that too, I said. The 14th was a Friday. Rosa made biscuits that morning, the ones with sharp cheddar that I'd taught her to make years ago from my mother's recipe. She set the table in the front parlor, the good china, cloth napkins, the small pitcher of cream. I wore my gray cashmere. Thomas had always liked it on me, and I sat in my chair by the window with a book open in my lap when I heard the car in the driveway. My son-in-law came in first, carrying his briefcase and a takeout coffee he hadn't thought to bring one for me. My daughter came in behind him, wearing a silk blouse and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She kissed my cheek and said I looked lovely. I thanked her and offered her a biscuit. Warren arrived 15 minutes later, which was the arrangement. My son-in-law had not been told Warren would be there. I watched his expression when Rosa showed Warren into the parlor a flicker of something, too fast to name, and then the smooth, professional composure back in place. Mrs. Whitmore, Marcus said pleasantly. We really just need a few signatures today. It's routine. Warren doesn't need to be involved. Warren handles all my affairs, I said. He always has. Of course, but sit down, Marcus, I said. He sat. My son-in-law produced the documents from his briefcase. He laid them out in front of me the way he always did, tapping each page near the signature line, explaining in simplified language what each one meant. The family trust, the property transfer, the account consolidation. His explanations were smooth and entirely misleading, which I now recognized was a skill he had practiced long before he met us. Just there, he said, placing a pen near my right hand. And then the next page, same spot. I looked at the pen. I looked at the papers. Then I folded my hands on the table. Tell me about the management company, I said. Silence. The one incorporated in Delaware, I continued. The one that received $340,000 in transfers from my accounts over the last 7 months. Tell me what services it provided. Marcus's expression did not move for 3 full seconds. That was how I knew he was deciding, not surprised, not confused, deciding what to do next. How much I actually knew, Mom, my daughter said softly. Her voice had changed. Where did you? How did you? And the trust, I said, picking up the document. The trust that names you as managing trustee with full discretionary authority. The one that would give you the right to sell any property without my consent. I set it back down. Warren reviewed it last week. My son-in-law looked at Warren. Warren looked back at him with the mild, unhurried expression of a man who has seen this before. Eleanor, Marcus said the first time he had ever used my name, instead of calling me by a softened title. You have to understand. This was designed for your protection. Estate planning for someone in my condition? I asked. He stopped. I called you Thomas once, I said. In October. You told my wife about it as evidence that I was declining. I said it deliberately. I wanted to see what you'd do with it. I have been watching you for 8 months, Marcus. I have been in this chair listening to every word you said in this house because you spoke freely around me. You thought silence was the same as absence. I paused. It isn't. My daughter had gone very still. Her coffee cup was untouched in front of her. Claire, I said, and something in my voice must have changed because she looked up. I know you didn't plan this. I know you let yourself not look at it because looking was harder, but you were in that kitchen on October 22nd. You heard what he said, and you told him to make sure Rosa wasn't here. Her eyes filled. She didn't speak. I'm not telling you that to wound you, I said. I'm telling you because I need you to understand that I know. Warren opened his own folder, then the one he'd brought, and placed it on the table in front of Marcus. A summary of the transfers, the management company filings, the paper trail that ended exactly where you'd expect it to. You'll want an attorney, Warren said simply. Not today's purpose, but soon. Marcus picked up his briefcase. He didn't say anything more. He looked once at my daughter, and what passed over his face in that moment was not guilt or even shame. It was the particular expression of a man who has calculated a situation and found himself on the wrong side of the number. He walked out of the parlor, and a moment later I heard the front door open and close. My daughter sat across from me in the quiet parlor, not moving. I didn't know about the transfers, she said. Not the amount. I believe you, I said. Not entirely, but mostly. She closed her eyes. I'm so sorry. I poured her coffee for her. The cup was still warm. We sat like that for a while without speaking, which felt, for the first time in 8 months, like the honest version of something. In the weeks that followed, Warren filed the paperwork to recover what could be recovered. Marcus did not contest it. He moved out of my daughter's house 12 days later. She told me this on the phone. Her voice careful and dry in the way of someone who has cried enough to be done with it for now. He had apparently found other arrangements. In Atlanta, my daughter did not elaborate and I did not ask. Rosa, in the new will Warren helped me complete, is named the recipient of the River Cottage, which she has said she doesn't want, but which she will keep, I suspect, because some gifts are not really about the gift. She also received a sum that will mean her children don't have to work through college. When Warren read her that section of the document, she folded her arms across her chest and looked at the window and didn't say a word for a full minute. Then she said, I should have charged you more for 11 years, and went to make us both coffee. The house is mine again. Not that it was ever really anything else, but there is a difference between owning something and feeling it. I feel it now in the mornings when I come downstairs, and the light is long across the pine floors, and there is no one placing documents on the kitchen table, no one with a careful explanation and a pen. Just the house, breathing the way old houses do, settling into itself, familiar with being known. My daughter comes on Sundays. She brings the newspaper and sometimes pastries from the bakery on Whitaker Street. We don't talk about Marcus. We talk about her work, a project she's designing, a public garden on the east side, something she seems genuinely excited about for the first time in longer than I can measure. We sit on the porch in the afternoon and watch the neighborhood go by, and sometimes we don't talk at all, which is, I think, where we are learning to find each other again. I'm not playing confused anymore. There was a particular relief in that. In the morning, I walked into the kitchen and answered Rosa's first question directly and watched her face shift from careful watchfulness into something easier. She made a face at me. I made one back. We had biscuits and coffee, and I read the newspaper right side up, and nobody performed anything for anyone. The minor stroke left me with a slight drag in my left foot and a tendency to lose words when I'm tired. Not the whole word, just the precise one, the exact one I want. the one that refuses to surface when I reach for it. This is real. This I don't perform. I have begun to understand the difference between what is actually diminished and what was only assumed to be, and there is more of the latter than I would have believed 8 months ago, when I was still sitting in a hospital bed, being told to take it slow. Last Tuesday, I sat down at the drafting table in the upstairs study for the first time since before the stroke. Not for work, I'm not sure there will be work again, and I find I'm at peace with that uncertainty. But I wanted to draw something. I picked up a pencil and drew the floor plan of this house from memory, every room, every doorway, every place the light falls differently in the morning than it does at dusk. It took me 2 hours and my hand cramped twice, and I had to stop and flex my fingers and start again. When I finished, I pinned it to the wall above the drafting table. Not because it was beautiful, though I think it was, because I drew it without help, without assistance, without anyone's simplified explanation of what I was doing and why. I drew it because I still know where the weight falls. I drew it because the lines came out clean, and because this house, in the end, is the truest record of who we were, Thomas and I, in our good years. My daughter, in her childhood, before she learned to look away from hard things. Rosa, in her 11 years of steady presence. Even Marcus. I suppose every house has a record of everyone who passed through it, and what they cost. I stood back and looked at the drawing for a long time. The rooms were all there, exactly where I'd left them.